Hi, and welcome back to Heimlich History. In this video, I'm going to review all of Unit 1 for AP World History. And this isn't just a review of the facts. I'm actually going to help you compare different civilizations and different situations with one another, because comparison is a historical thinking skill that you have to nail in order to do well in this course. And you should know that this video is part of a larger review course called the AP World History Cram Course. And in the Cram Course, we have unit reviews just like this one for all 9 of the AP World History units. In addition, there's practice multiple choice questions, there's study guides for the videos. If you're interested in that kind of thing, then the link is down below. So the years covered in Unit 1 are 1200 to 1450. First, the big picture. Within this span of years, major civilizations are growing larger. World religions continue to exert a huge influence on life and culture. There's technological innovations aplenty, like gunpowder and paper. On the other hand, while all these realities are growing, smaller states, localized religious beliefs, and older technology continue to decline. Okay, that's the big picture. Now let's drill down into the particulars. One of the main themes of Unit 1 is state building. And be careful, because the word state can be very confusing. Like when we say the word state here in America, we mean like Georgia or Nebraska. But in the context of AP World History, that's not what state means. In this context, state means an organized political community under one government. So in that way, Georgia is a state, but then so is the United States. Nebraska is a state, but then so is, like, Canada. So all that to say, a main theme of Unit 1 is how states built themselves up and how they retained control over their varied populations. Alright, now let's get into the comparisons. And here's the question we'll use as our guide. How was the process of state building both similar and different in various parts of the world? Now let's start with two very contrasty examples, the Song Dynasty in China and the Abbasid Caliphate. During this time, the Song Dynasty was in power in China, and this was considered China's golden age. And this golden age was really just an extension of the golden age that preceded it in the Tang Dynasty. And part of this golden age was the advancement of technology. Among these technologies was gunpowder, which eventually made its way around the world and had an explosive effect. Dad joke! The Chinese also improved upon the Grand Canal, which their friends in the Sui Dynasty began, which had the effect of boosting trade between different regions and maintaining a consistent Chinese culture throughout the territory. Also during this time, there was the introduction of Champa rice, which was the kind of rice that matured early, could resist droughts and floods, and could be harvested 3 times a year. And as is always the case, more food equals more babies. This new food technology led to an explosion of population. And in addition to technological advances, the Song Chinese experienced cultural progress as well. One example is the revival of Confucianism. Now, Confucianism served as a powerful cultural stabilizer since his teachings outlined how a society was to be organized. A second example, and related, is the revival and expansion of the civil service examination. This was an examination that a person had to take if they wanted to work in the imperial bureaucracy, and in order to pass it, that person had to be well versed in the Confucian classics. The examination opened up the bureaucratic positions way beyond the nobility and transformed government work into more of a meritocracy. Okay, that's what's going on in Song China during this period. Now let's go all the way to the other side of Asia and see what's going on in the Abbasid Caliphate. While the Chinese flourished during this period, the Abbasid Caliphate was fractured by invaders and falling apart. Even so, new Muslim states arose out of its ashes. The first was in India, known as the Sultanate of Delhi. The Sultanate was a state established by Muslim Turks, and although they indeed gained power in India, they had a very difficult time converting the massive Indian society to Islam. Another Muslim state established during this time was the Mamluk Sultanate in North Africa. The word Mamluk means slave, and that's basically what it was, a slave empire. The Egyptian state enslaved these folks, who were not Muslims, and forced them to serve in the military. But during a period of unrest, the Mamluks overthrew the government and established their own state known as the Mamluk Sultanate. So the point of the comparison is this: the Song Dynasty is flourishing during this period, socially, politically, and economically, while the Abbasid Caliphate on the other side of Asia is dying politically, socially, and economically. Alright, let's move around the world to make some more comparisons in state building, but we're going to move a little more quickly, get a little less detail on these than we did in the Song and the Abbasid. In South Asia, you've got the Vijayanagara Empire and you've got the Chola Kingdom. Both of these kingdoms built their states and expanded their influence by means of trade. And if we go over to Africa, we can consider the Kingdom of Mali. If you compare this kingdom to the Empire of Ghana, which preceded it, we'll see that the rulers of Mali built their state by centralizing power to a much greater extent than their predecessors. The result of this is that they gained a tremendous amount of wealth, as exemplified by their ruler Mansa Musa. Now let's go over to the Americas. In Mesoamerica, the Aztecs built a huge empire by ruling remotely, and they built that state by means of what's called a tribute system. And the tribute system is just a payment that conquered people have to pay for the privilege privilege of remaining conquered, and that could be either goods or services. And they enforced this system through a very powerful military. Now compare them with the Incas of the Andean region. In order to build their state, the Incans used what's called the Midas system. And that just means that they compelled their citizens into mandatory public service. And finally, the Europeans at the beginning of this period were locked into a more regional system of state building called feudalism. Feudalism was a way of structuring society with rigid class layers. You had kings on the top, then nobles, then knights, and then peasants and serfs last of all. But over the course of this period, feudal lords lost lots of their power to the rise of more powerful centralized monarchs. Okay, that's a look at state building around the world. Now let's talk about what's happening with religion in the various places that we've considered. In all parts of the world, religion was key to the process of state building. For example, when it came to Islam, it was able to create a system of shared beliefs and language, which is to say Arabic, which was able to unite the regions throughout Afro-Eurasia. Confucianism, as I mentioned before, was a huge factor in the flourishing of Song China. The dynastic rulers used the principles of Confucianism to justify its rule over the people. And all the bureaucratic workers were Confucian because they had to pass a civil service examination, which was thoroughly Confucian. Alright, and let's look at Hinduism and Buddhism. In South Asia and Southeast Asia, rulers relied on the principles of Hinduism and Buddhism to consolidate power, especially Hinduism's teaching of the caste system. But hey, let's not forget the Catholics. During this time, individual European states were relatively weak, but the Catholic Church provided a way of organizing society apart from the state. However, during this period, some powerful political states emerged in France and the Holy Roman Empire, and this introduced a struggle for power between the church and state. So all major world religions spread during this period. Christianity and Islam and Buddhism, which were conversionist religions, which just means that they sent out converts to try to make converts. All three of these religions sent out massive amounts of missionaries to different parts of the globe. And over time, they ended up converting huge portions of the world's population to their beliefs. And this spread of religion had the effect of weakening local, more indigenous religions. Now, conversion isn't the only way that religious folks tried to convert people. There was also conversion by military invasion. For example, the Muslims invaded northern India and established the Delhi Sultanate and converted about 25% of the Indian population to Islam. Now, don't misunderstand, it's not as though the Muslims came in and said, convert or die. Islam did not allow such things. But many people converted in order to avoid paying the jizya, which is the tax you paid for not being a Muslim, or they converted to get themselves greater opportunities in the government or business. Also, many conversions happened because of trade. As merchants of many religious stripes traveled to and fro across the Sahara Desert and around the Indian Ocean, many conversions occurred. And I say that to remind you that merchants aren't just carrying goods to these distant places for trade, they're also carrying whole cultural structures with them, and those end up spreading as well. Alright, now let's turn the corner and talk about technological exchanges throughout the world. China had a big win during this period when Champa rice was introduced from Vietnam. As I mentioned before, this helped feed the growing Chinese population. Also, the manufacturing of paper was transferred from China to the West. And the effect of this transfer was a huge spike in literacy rates in Europe, and also in Southwest Asia and North Africa. And because literacy rates increased, so did learning, especially in fields like medicine and mathematics. A key example of this new love of learning was the House of Wisdom established in Baghdad during the Abbasid dynasty, which was a place of study and translation of the great European and Asian works of the past. And then finally, we can't leave this review without talking about the enduring importance of nomadic people during this time. Now, the Mongols are the key example here, but we're going to spend much more time with them in Unit 2. They were pastoral people from the Central Asian steppe, and they ruled over a huge empire stretching across Afro-Eurasia. And because their empire was so vast, they provided a healthy measure of political stability and safety. The result of that stability was increased trade, especially among the Silk Roads, and increased cross-cultural interactions. And there were other important nomadic peoples like the Turks, but what you really need to know is this. Prior to this period, nomadic peoples had a huge role in the transfer of technology and culture among different states. But during this period, from 1200 to 1450, the influence of nomadic peoples began to wane. As more organized groups of merchants and traders arose, the role of nomadic peoples began to diminish when it comes to the transfer of culture. Alright, that's Unit 1 for AP World History. If you felt like I went too quickly over anything, then there are topic videos over here that will go into more depth on each topic of the curriculum. If you like what I do here and you want to see more, then subscribe and come along. I'm here to help you get an A in AP World History and a 5 on your exam. Alright, that's it. Heimler out. I'll see you next time.